To go on this little baby rant about Rachel Zegler. She's the young woman that was cast as Snow White, not because she can't keep her mouth shut. I'm totally fine with with the celebrities telling me what their politics are, who they're voting for, etc., etc. We've become accustomed to that. But because she has this underlying anger and hatred in her that always has to take it like one step too far. And Rachel decides to go on really just a psychopathic, demented rant.
Yeah, we're sick of it. We're sick of this bullshit. This is what you're getting. So the more you do this, Disney, Iger, what is this girl's name? Rachel Zegler, whatever her name is. Yes, this is exactly the backlash you're going to get from parents. If I'm Bob Iger, you know what we're doing? Emergency meeting. We're putting Snow White on hold for 2 years, and guess what?
Smart.
Pay her a couple $1,000,000, go away. We're going to bring another person to play this role.
How did one actress nearly topple the House of Mouse? How did she help ignite one of the biggest controversies in Disney's modern era? You might think a classic fairy tale like Snow White is untouchable, a sweet, time-honored story about love, friendship, and dreams that come true. But for all the magic Disney wields, even they couldn't foresee the storm brewing when they cast Rachel Zegler in their lavish live-action adaptation. One moment, the hype soared, a beloved property, updated for a new generation, led by a charismatic young star. The next, it crumbled before everyone's eyes, taking Bob Iger's job with it and plunging Disney into a crisis they're still struggling to contain. It all started innocently enough. When Rachel Zegler's casting was announced, many embraced the idea of a fresh face stepping into the slippers of the iconic princess. She wasn't just talented. She was young, outspoken, and riding high off an award-winning performance that showcased her potential. Her star was on the rise, and Disney hoped her wide-eyed enthusiasm would charm audiences worldwide. But in the lead-up to this production, as soon as Zegler began expressing her thoughts on the 1937 original film, labeling it backwards and outdated, an undercurrent of doubt seeped into fans' minds. Questions sprang up. Did Disney cast someone who actually disliked the role she was set to play? None of those concerns stopped production from roaring forward. Executives at the highest levels, Bob Iger among them, stood behind their choice. Publicly, they boasted about modernizing the old fairy tale. Privately, rumors swirled that Zegler had an unusual amount of creative influence over the script. While many actors have opinions, few get their ideas folded so extensively into a beloved canon. The possibility that the film would pivot so drastically from the original set social media on edge. Whenever a snippet of Zegler's interviews emerged, where she admitted she saw Snow White's romance as dull or implied the old movie's message was archaic, online fans seized on it, either praising her boldness or denouncing her disrespect. After all, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs isn't just a cartoon. It's arguably the film that launched Disney's animation empire. Messing with it is like repainting the Mona Lisa. Yes, times change, social values evolve, and strong female roles are increasingly demanded. But there's a delicate balance between refreshing a classic and demolishing its core magic. Disney, for its part, claimed they were being thoughtful. They certainly tried to reassure fans that the fundamental innocence of the story would remain intact. But behind the scenes, insiders witnessed a different narrative unfolding. Lengthy script debates, friction between the lead actor's vision and the creative team, and an undertow of corporate second-guessing. All of this might have stayed invisible if not for Zegler's outspoken nature, magnified by a press environment hungry for drama. In interviews meant to promote the film, she doubled down on her criticisms of the original storyline. Criticisms that could easily be interpreted as mocking or belittling the beloved 1937 classic. She railed against the idea of true love's kiss, questioning why any modern woman would dream about a prince. She challenged the premise of Snow White's gentle, wide-eyed innocence. At first, some spectators gave her credit for wanting to depict a stronger, more independent princess. But her remarks frequently took on a scornful edge, raising eyebrows among Disney loyalists. Then came the real bombshell. Bob Iger candidly admitted that Zegler's input had shaped the new story in several key ways. Perhaps he intended to highlight a collaborative, forward-thinking production. Instead, fans and critics seized on his statement as proof that Disney was letting a single star's personal agenda overshadow decades of cherished tradition. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a respectful update to a fairy tale. It was about an actress who apparently found Snow White laughable and a studio that allowed her to rewrite the script. Online debates frothed. People wondered, since when does Disney let one performer steer the creative ship? The chatter got so intense that fan communities even started referring to Zegler as the downfall of Snow White, a hyperbolic claim that captured just how angry and sometimes irrational diehard fans had become. At that point, Disney tried to retool their publicity approach, quietly instructing Zegler to focus on the film's positive aspects, yet that only seemed to trigger further pushback. During press junkets, her offhand remarks about disliking certain elements of the old fairy tale went viral. She questioned whether the Prince Charming dynamic truly deserved a place in modern storytelling, calling it weird that Snow White might accept romantic gestures from a stranger. To some progressive audiences, these were valid points. But to many others, it felt like she was mocking the DNA of Disney's first princess. Suddenly, every interview turned into a new controversy, each headline more sensational than the last. Snow White star calls 1937 classic outdated garbage, or Rachel Zegler rants against Disney's original vision. Even if not always entirely accurate, the headlines stuck, fueling the narrative that she disliked the film that had made her famous before she ever stepped on set. Meanwhile, people inside Disney grew increasingly nervous. They had poured millions into filming, marketing, and merchandising. Analysts predicted that, at best, Snow White would be a moderate success given the controversy factor. Still, no one expected it to become a fiasco so severe that it might jeopardize top-level executives. Yet from rumored on-set arguments, like how the dwarfs were portrayed or whether the iconic Love's First Kiss scene should be minimized, to Zegler's many monologues about cultural updates, it was clear the production was fracturing under the weight of conflicting visions. Even the film's co-star Gal Gadot, initially hired to bring star power and gravitas, took a notably subdued stance in the press, appearing to sidestep direct confrontation with Zegler's more heated remarks. When the long-awaited premiere date finally arrived, early screenings suggested trouble. Critics seemed intrigued by the high production value, but they also noted a disjointed tone. The whimsical charm that made Snow White an emblem of innocence was replaced by heavier themes about social responsibility, female empowerment, and autonomy. Yes, times have changed since 1937. But was the new Snow White still magical or just preachy? That question flared up online, spurring memes from nostalgic fans lamenting they took the happy out of happily ever after. As the film opened to the public, the real blow hit: lukewarm box office returns. Audiences who ventured out mostly left confused. Some appreciated the attempt to modernize. Others found the changes off-putting or forced. And Rachel Zegler was firmly at the center of the blame. A wave of negative commentary slammed her social media daily. Suddenly, PR folks at Disney realized that focusing on a single star's supposed authentic voice could backfire catastrophically if audiences viewed it as irreverent toward the treasured source material. In a bid to manage the situation, Bob Iger tried doubling down on corporate damage control. He arranged for Zegler to appear on The View, hoping she'd charm daytime viewers by explaining that she cared deeply about the story but believed it deserved a contemporary viewpoint. Instead, the segment spiraled. As soon as co-hosts asked about her stance on certain social issues, topics she was famously vocal about, she jumped in with unfiltered commentary that had nothing to do with Snow White itself. Producers tried steering the conversation back, but the damage was done. By the end of her appearance, the meltdown was trending on social media. Fans who saw the fiasco joked that it was a bigger fiasco than the movie itself. Disney's planned nice and neat narrative had exploded on live television. Back at the Disney headquarters, the meltdown overshadowed everything. Internal documents revealed a sense of panic among marketing teams. They had no idea how to salvage a film that seemingly alienated its own target demographic. It wasn't just that some viewers disliked a progressive Snow White. It was that so many felt the spirit of the original had been fundamentally betrayed. And now the star, apparently ignoring PR guidelines, was fueling controversy after controversy. If the message had been "We love Snow White, but let's update it for modern times," the public might have listened. Instead, it sounded like Zegler was on a mission to tear down a cherished piece of Disney history, with Disney's top brass giving her the keys. In the wake of the View debacle, Bob Iger found himself in the hot seat. For a while, he tried to handle it quietly, meeting with stakeholders and staff behind closed doors. But the story took on a life of its own. Zegler versus Walt's legacy. Who will win? Financial analysts began whispering that the film was set to lose millions. Executive board members grew restless. They questioned how the once great juggernaut known for robust box office results and bulletproof family entertainment had drifted into such chaotic territory. As the movie continued its theatrical run, the financial updates were grim. Families weren't flocking to see Snow White. Citing controversy fatigue, many said they'd wait until the film was on streaming, if they bothered to watch it at all. Streams of negative headlines, fueled by Zegler's repeated statements, drowned out any attempt at redemption. By the second or third weekend, even longtime Disney supporters had to admit this project was a flop. The looming question became, who's going to take the blame? In typical corporate fashion, blame ricocheted across departments. The creative team faulted marketing for failing to manage the star's image. Marketing fired back, saying the real mistake was letting an actress with strong opinions reshape the entire script. Others criticized Bob Iger specifically for publicly revealing that Zegler had so much input in the first place. Maybe if he hadn't validated her creative authority, fans wouldn't have singled her out as the scapegoat. But such speculation was too little, too late. Word on the street was that Disney was facing a serious existential crisis, one that might cost Iger his job. Indeed, it did. While many factors contributed to Bob Iger's eventual resignation, the meltdown around Snow White was one fiasco too many, confirming to the Disney board that drastic changes were necessary. How often have we seen a revered brand, a timeless story, and a big-name CEO get knocked off balance by a single production? The fiasco etched itself into Disney lore, an example of how the unstoppable can be stopped by the perfect mix of fan outrage, actor-driven creative friction, and corporate mismanagement. In the aftermath, insiders revealed that Zegler herself felt conflicted. Despite outward bravado, she worried about being labeled box office poison, a tag that can haunt an actor's career. She confided to friends that she never intended to trash Disney's heritage. She only wanted to ensure Snow White reflected the values she believed modern audiences embraced. Some claimed she felt misunderstood, pointing out that Snow White was never a perfect story to begin with. Would Walt Disney have wanted it to stay stuck in the 1930s? She allegedly asked. Or would he have embraced modern possibilities? Her defenders argued that Disney's real mistake was failing to unify all these new ideas into a coherent narrative that respected tradition. Instead, it felt like patchwork changes overshadowed by persistent negative press. Meanwhile, fans debated whether any updated version of Snow White was destined to meet backlash. Nostalgia runs deep, especially for cornerstone titles in Disney's vault. If you alter them too much, you risk alienating older audiences. If you stay too faithful, younger viewers might say, "That's so dated." The trick is striking the perfect balance. According to many, that didn't happen here. The final product, overshadowed by controversies about its star, never managed to find a sweet spot between classic wonder and modern innovation. Then there's the separate drama with Gal Gadot. People speculated that she also had ideas about her evil queen character, but was overshadowed by the swirling mania around Rachel Zegler's statements. In interviews, Gadot often offered carefully neutral responses. "I trust the directors," or "I'm happy to be part of the magic." Insiders guessed she was either trying to stay above the fray or quietly distancing herself from a project that was becoming a PR quagmire. Nevertheless, the entire fiasco turned into a cautionary tale about star power, brand loyalty, and corporate synergy gone wrong. One studio insider lamented, "We wanted creative input from the cast, but we forgot to protect the brand." Now look where we are. When the film's poor box office run became obvious, Disney scrambled to figure out next steps. Some executives lobbied for an immediate shift to streaming, hoping to bury negative buzz by overshadowing it with new releases. Others insisted that pulling it prematurely from theaters would be an admission of defeat, harming the brand's image as a guaranteed crowd pleaser. For a while, they let it limp along at the box office, hoping to recoup at least some of the budget. But the final tally was disheartening, and soon after, it landed on Disney Plus with little fanfare, overshadowed by the next wave of streaming content. The sense of failure around the movie became so strong that it bled over into how Disney approached future projects. Suddenly, any talk of significantly reimagining classic stories triggered anxiety among board members. Privately, employees joked about a new Zegler rule, meaning you don't give untested stars too much sway over the script, especially if it's a property as iconic as Snow White. The fiasco also cast a shadow over how Disney weighs progressive storytelling changes against the risk of alienating mainstream audiences. The meltdown signaled that pushing boundaries is possible but requires nuance and a well-thought-out plan, neither of which seemed present here. All this turmoil culminated in Bob Iger's departure. While he'd been a Disney titan for years, helming major acquisitions and expansions, the Snow White situation was the final blow. Official statements claimed he was stepping down for personal reasons and future opportunities, but insiders revealed that the board was deeply concerned about the brand's direction. They wanted a fresh face at the helm, someone who could regroup, quell the controversies, and chart a more stable path forward. When a Disney CEO steps down following a string of flops, you know things have reached crisis levels. Observers outside the Mouse House cited this fiasco as a prime example of how even a giant can get lost when it forgets to align its brand identity with the star power it employs. For Rachel Zegler, the aftermath was complicated. She reportedly received offers for new roles, but with more caution from studios uncertain whether her outspokenness might overshadow their projects, too. Those close to her say she learned a tough lesson. Creative expression is vital, but you risk torpedoing a production if you don't handle a legacy property with some reverence. At the same time, she maintained that her stances came from a place of sincerity. If Disney was serious about modernization, wasn't it logical to highlight potential flaws in the old story? Her perspective is that a new generation of viewers deserves a princess who exemplifies self-reliance and modern values. Critics retort that Snow White was never about subservience to a prince, but about kindness, friendship, and enduring optimism, traits many feel she dismissed. For Disney itself, the fiasco raised pressing questions about how to handle future reboots. Do they dial back on heavy messages in favor of preserving the original tone? Or do they keep forging ahead with progressive remakes, determined to reshape classics for the 21st century? Some guess the brand will opt for safer bets, focusing on smaller changes or lesser-known stories, so as not to provoke the fury of devoted fans. Others predict an even bolder pivot, doubling down on modern themes but with tighter control over who speaks for the film publicly. After all, the meltdown on The View hammered home how quickly a star's unfiltered remarks can boomerang into mainstream condemnation. One lesson stands out. Synergy between actor and studio must be carefully orchestrated. Disney's brand thrives on harmony, family values, and a sense of wonder. A star who publicly disdains the essence of a classic property can break that spell. There's a line between progressive reinterpretation and overt scorn for what made the original beloved. If you cross it, the blowback can be severe. Snow White proved that fans who cherish the old story aren't necessarily open to a complete overhaul, especially if it comes across as disrespectful. Meanwhile, audiences that do want updated roles and messages might recoil if the film is perceived as half-hearted or cynically forced. It's a lose-lose if you don't manage the balance. By the time the dust settled, Disney's dream of a blockbuster Snow White turned into a case study in what can go wrong when strong personalities, massive budgets, and storied franchises collide. Bob Iger's ouster was a direct reflection of how serious the meltdown became. No one thought the legendary CEO would get toppled by a single misfire. And yet, here we are. The meltdown overshadowed any box office success the film might have eked out, forging a narrative that Disney had lost touch with its audience, and that Zegler's creative input had proven toxic to the project's reception. Even months after the film left theaters, conversation about it reverberated online. Many fans said they planned to rewatch the 1937 version instead, reaffirming that no modern twist could replicate the charm of the original. As for future Disney live-action remakes, it's likely we'll see them approach the concept with far more caution. Maybe rewriting a line here or changing a minor subplot there, rather than overhauling the entire premise. The big question is whether the fiasco taught the company to handle star power more carefully, or if the box office fiasco scared them away from modernization entirely. After all, though the brand is an entertainment powerhouse, it's not invincible. Nostalgia and tradition still reign in many Disney fans' hearts, and messing with that can produce a wave of backlash strong enough to topple even the mightiest corporate kings. In the end, people can debate whether Rachel Zegler was a visionary pushing the envelope or a reckless newcomer biting the hand that fed her. They can argue whether Disney should have stood by the original script or swung harder for a modern reimagining. But the fiasco's lesson is clear. Changing a fairy tale's DNA is risky business, and if the lead actor's outspokenness frames those changes as arrogant or disrespectful, the audience might close the door before the story even begins. With Iger gone, Disney is left to pick up the pieces and figure out how to maintain its magic while venturing into new creative territory. Whether that next step involves returning to basics or forging a new frontier, the meltdown behind Snow White will loom as a cautionary tale, proof that even the most established brand can unravel when star-driven controversy meets cherished fan nostalgia. In the wake of all this, you have to wonder, did Rachel Zegler accomplish what she set out to do by redefining Snow White for a modern era? Or was this film doomed from the moment Disney tried to reinvent such a sentimental classic under the glare of an actor who openly questioned its core values? Ultimately, the meltdown shows that audiences today demand authenticity and updates to their favorite stories, and they can sense when it's forced or disjointed. If there's any moral to the fiasco, it might be that respect for the source material isn't just a courtesy. It's a necessity when billions of dollars and generations of collective memory are on the line. Through it all, we're left with a story more dramatic than the fairy tale itself, an actress, a CEO, and a movie that was supposed to resurrect old-school Disney magic. Instead, it revealed the cracks in the system. Classics aren't guaranteed hits just because the Disney name is attached. Controversy can overshadow even the most lavish budget, and a single star can become the catalyst for a cultural battle that knocks an entire empire off balance. In the end, the meltdown and Bob Iger's exit carved out a new chapter in Disney history, one that will loom large whenever the company contemplates tinkering with its iconic properties. The next time Disney decides to rework a classic, they'll be thinking carefully about what happened here. Fairy tales might be timeless, but in the modern world, even a princess can spark a corporate quake if her words strike the wrong chord in the kingdom.